Let's talk today about prayer. It's an interesting passage, although my comments will be short. I apologize. We will come back at some point, talk about prayer. I've got a brand new series coming up after Easter that I think you will thoroughly enjoy. We're going to go to another book in the Bible. It'll be in the Old Testament. It's a life-changing book. I can tell you that. And anyway, but let's talk about prayer. Now, the other week, the women came out to the house for a Bible study, out to our apartment, I should say, and Maggie presented a request for Charles, and after it was over that night, and Carol told me what the request was, and so I prayed, right? Because what else do you do? I prayed. And I'm thinking, this is an impossible situation, seems like. This prayer request that Charles had, and oh, wow, I'll pray anyway. I mean, because what are you going to do? Say, well, I don't know why I pray about it. No, you pray and trust God. And so the next morning I prayed again. And by midday, Maggie, I guess, had texted Carol, and the problem was solved. And I haven't even got to talk to Charles yet about it because, just how things go, and if like last week or whatever, we don't see each other or something. And I thought, wow, prayer is an incredible, incredible thing. And I wish I could tell you a story every week where I experienced the impossible. But let me ask you this. When we talk about prayer, what are your expectations? I mean, you do have some. I don't care if you pray for 20 minutes. You might just say, well, I'll just go through the motions. I don't know. But the Bible is fascinating on so many levels, and it's easily to read a text and totally miss what's in the text. It's crazy. I don't know about you, but an ad can come on TV. Now, look, I'm not into TV ads. Carol may watch it, and she said, well, did you get that? I said, no, because I wasn't paying any mind. I totally missed the ad. I really don't know what they were telling me to buy or do or whatever. But when we come to the Bible, boy, we want to know what the text says, and we don't want to read into it what it doesn't say. Okay, for instance, we're going to go to James chapter 5, and because that's where we're at, and this is a very, very well-known text. People have used it. Now, the Roman Catholic Church came up with their teaching of extreme unction. And that's where you prepare people for death. Now, you have to stretch the text to find death in the text. All right? Now, how do you come up with this? Other people, faith healers, come up with something else, and there's no way you can read the text at face value and come up with some of this stuff. So I want to know what the text is saying. I'm trying to stretch it or anything like that, and let's not miss the obvious. But I know this, when you pray, expectations are huge. Now, at the same time, prayer can be a baffling subject. I know, look, we'd all like to have a formula. I can give you a pattern for prayer, but I can't give you a formula for answered prayer. I can't give you a formula for anything when it comes to God, because then I would reduce him to a formula. That's not going to work. But I do want to talk today about 4 reasonable expectations about prayer. Now, these come right out of the text. Not going to add anything. We're not going to take anything. We're just going to come away with 4 expectations. No, before I get into my message per se, let me give you a quote from a preacher in the 4th century, John of Antioch. Without a doubt, one of the greatest preachers of all time. His voice, they called him Golden Mouth. The guy was just an orator that could not be surpassed. And his nickname was Chrysostom. And listen to his description of prayer. Now, I wish I could have heard, there are no tape recordings, so we can't go back, pull this out of the archives. Here's what he said, though. The potency of prayer has subdued the strength of fire. It has bridled the rage of lions, hushed anarchy to rest, extinguished wars, appeased the elements, expelled demons, burst the chains of death, expanded the fates of heaven, assuaged diseases, dispelled frauds, rescued cities from destruction, stayed the sun of its course, arrested the progress of the thunderbolt. There is in it an all-sufficient panoply, a treasure undiminished, a mind which is never exhausted, a sky unobscured by clouds, a heaven unruffled by the storm. It is the root, the fountain, the mother of 1,000 blessings. Now, everything he said comes right out of the Bible. Right out of the Bible. Now, I know what you might be thinking. My prayer life is way different than what you just described. And there's the rub. Well, here's what I want to do this morning. This is what I try to do every week. Let's see if we can close the gap. Because we read this in the Bible, and then we look at our prayer life, and then we see this gap. Every week we want to close the gap. If I'm teaching on humility, we want to close the gap. If I'm teaching on joy, we want to close the gap. That's what we try to do every week. Close the gap. That's all. Because we're striving every week to become more like Jesus and to become more knowledgeable and understanding of what the Bible teaches. Well, we can just close the gap. And I can't imagine anybody who would not like to see the gap closed a little bit when it comes to their prayer life. There's so much available to us as believers, and a lot of it is going to be missed apart from prayer. James told us earlier in chapter 4, you have not because you ask not. And while we'll never resolve all the mysteries surrounding prayer, we'd like to be at least a little more satisfied. You'll never be satisfied, but you'd certainly like to feel like some of the expectations we talk about today are a reality in your life. So, I want you to have high expectations. Don't misunderstand. But at the core, prayer is about our vital relationship that we have with God through prayer. Across the various cultures and religions around the world, there's always been some sort of an attempt to communicate with the divine realm. So let's get into the text. Now, I want to give you 4 expectations. And when you pray, you're not looking for all 4 of these at the same time, perhaps. But let's get going. Now, number 1, if you want to write this down, number 1 is comfort. 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 James 5:13. Is any among you suffering? Okay, you remember, let's remind ourselves who James is writing to. The church in Jerusalem, persecution broke out. Acts chapter 8, you can read about it. A lot of the church was scattered and left the city of Jerusalem. Well, James, being the pastor at the church at Jerusalem, he wrote to believers who had been scattered out there and all that. So he's writing to believers who have endured persecution and suffering and heartache and all that goes with having your lives disrupted. So he says, is any among you suffering? Well, he knows the answer to that is there's a lot of you that I'm writing to this. Let him pray. Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praises. Well, When you're overwhelmed, you want to pray. That's your first course of action. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our afflictions, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Now, don't overlook the next part of the verse, because we're to sing praises when life is going well. Now, yeah, at times your life's going to be like that, up and down. It is. I mean, that's kind of like life. And there was an old man, I think from the 70s, about the Olympics, and it would talk about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, because so much of life is highs and lows. And one of the great ways to experience comfort in prayer is to pray with the psalmist. After all, the Psalms are meant to be prayed. You know, Psalm 23 has brought comfort to countless people. And I know most people think of that like at funerals, but listen, way back, if you go back like 150 years or earlier, Psalm 23 was not relegated just to funerals. It was very, very common. I mean, listen, even for me, you know, I find it a little ironic that I'm preaching this message the week I have cancer surgery. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, we're up there at the NIH Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and it's just not a fun time. I mean, it's just not fun. I mean, nothing's really going on, but, you know, you're going to tests, you got things scheduled all until you leave. And then you're back in your room for a while, and then you're not, and then you're back in your, I mean, and it's just, you sit there and you wait. And I found myself, and I'm like, you know, praying, I just need comfort, because I don't like the waiting game. Now, I don't know how to be this afternoon, you know, but at least we're getting down to crunch time, and so on. So I read Psalm 23, I read Psalm 27, Psalm 24, and I felt like that really helped. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't you expect it to help? Seriously. I mean, is one of your expectations comfort? Huh? I mean, it should be. I mean, we're talking about real stuff. The God of all comfort. Now, I can tell right now I'm not going to finish my message, and I shortened it. All right. Now, you know, you have to ask yourself, do we rely too much on medication and not meditation? I wrote that down this week, and I thought, boy, you could tweet that, couldn't you? That's short. That's true, because you think of all the medications we buy, and I wonder if we're over-medicated. Oh, there's another thought. And under-meditated, huh? You might want to write that down too. That's good. I'm just telling you, if that's all you get, you did well today, all right? I mean, you could be lining up at the pharmacy, or you could be kneeling in prayer, maybe. Take your pick. I'm not saying you know that you might not need a pill for something. I don't know. And look, sometimes God may deliver you from your circumstances, and other times He may give you the grace to endure. That's life. James 4:6, God gives greater grace. Oh, I'd love not to have cancer. I would. I'd love not to have a surgery. Huh? I mean, nobody signs up for this stuff. I could use grace. Hey, once when Paul and Silas were in jail, they sang at midnight. Yeah, they're weird, probably. Bunch of dumb Christians. Who sings in prison at midnight? Believers who have experienced the grace and the comfort of God. So, comfort. I want you to expect it, seriously. And then I want you to enjoy it, because life's going to throw you curves. You get overlooked, you get discouraged, you face uncertainty, you're mistreated, you got to deal with difficult people, you got to deal with insecurity, and we can go on and on and on and on. And we need more than comfort. So let's move on. Verse number 2. Write down the words restoration or maybe refreshment. A little bit different than comfort. So now James says, is any among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church. Let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick. He didn't say it was the oil. It's the prayer. And the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Now, all right. Well, I've got to be somewhat short and brief here, so let me see what I can do. Life does make us weak, emotionally and spiritually. Now, the word for sickness that James uses is predominantly used of weakness due to suffering, which fits the context of James' reader. Yes, it can refer to physical sickness. Not discounting that. You can find this word used in the Gospels like that. Here's the deal. Let's not limit the text to somebody who is just physically sick. All right? I'm saying let's run the gamut. All right? And then when you are exhausted, this is beyond what we saw in the verse previous to this. This is a much deeper. This is being past overwhelmed. This is like at your breaking point. All right, and you are so emotionally exhausted. Perhaps it would be like if you had a child with a terminal disease, you could be. You think about that after a year or two, you could be just totally sick in the sense that you are emotionally and physically spent. Okay, so I just want to make sure we cover and think out what the text says and not leave anybody out. Now, obviously in Jesus' day, oil was used for medicinal purpose, but the Samaritan, remember he poured oil on the man's wounds. But oil was also used for personal grooming and refreshment. And Jesus once told some people to go anoint themselves with oil so they would look fresher and not so distraught or emotionally down. So it does have a practical use. Now, here's the deal. So let's understand. This text is practical. Okay, so you get somebody to come pray. Well, here's the deal. Maybe you could do something practical for somebody, not anoint them with oil. Maybe you need to take them to lunch. Maybe you need to go have a cup of coffee. Maybe you need to ride with them. They've got to make a 2-hour trip somewhere, and they just need company. That's practical. That's like anointing somebody with oil because you're trying to do something that will restore somebody or refresh them. That's what James is getting at here. Not everybody you know is going to be sick. And I know a lot of times, you get in a prayer meeting, everybody lists everything they know about everybody's being sick. Honestly, I don't know that many people that are sick. Okay, I'm kind of sick. I am having surgery. And I've got a good friend who's sick. Okay, now I'm out. You know what I mean? I don't know anybody else who's really sick. If I thought about it, maybe I could think. So, I don't know. So let's not overlook the practical side here. Psalm 23, you anoint my head with oil. God didn't literally anoint David's head with oil, but what he did, he came down and he refreshed David in the midst of his suffering. So you have to ask, what can you do, what can I do to help alleviate somebody's problem, somebody's sickness? How can I come alongside, offer some tangible help, whatever that is, because everybody's different, all right? For instance, I'll be home probably like Tuesday or Wednesday. Do not come see me I don't want anybody coming to see me. Don't do that. I will see you in a couple weeks. I'm just not, you trust me. Trust me on that one. Okay? That would not be tangible. Wouldn't be, you just wouldn't work. All right. But as you can see, this is not formulaic. You know, if you could put it in a nutshell, James says, look, you're going to run into people who are sick. Yeah, it may be a physical sickness, but it might not be. It might be an extreme mental, emotional, physical exhaustion or whatever. And you can come alongside and do something tangible. Oh, yeah, now listen, if they are sick, get some guys together or whatever, people, and pray. Sure, we're not discounting that at all, obviously. And God may choose to heal and he may choose not to. All right, and it's 10:58. So I'm going to give you the next 2 points, and it's just that I have to quit. Now, a third thing is fellowship. Now, it could be that sin does cause problems. I don't have time to drill down at all. And obviously, I think confession of sin is a rare component in the Christian life. And I do believe that true fellowship, which I wish I could drill down some, but I can't today, we miss out on. All right? And I kind of have to leave it, at that. The fourth thing is power. And then so James brings up, and you can read the text, he brings up Elijah. Now here's the deal. James did not go back and look for an illustration of somebody who was healed due to prayer, which gives me pause that that's not really at the forefront of James's mind, is physical healing. He just wants to illustrate the power of prayer. And I think that perhaps that's what we're really after. Well, I just have to close my thoughts. I just have to stop, all right? But here's what we got. 4 expectations. Comfort. Restoration, refreshment. Fellowship, which is obviously a missing jewel within a body of believers way too often. And then power. And that means you just like to see results. You like to see something happen. And I'll be dealing with prayer the second week after Easter. Maybe we'll come back. I don't know how I'll finish this, but I will not leave you hanging, all right? Of course, you've got to be here that week, but so you just don't know. All right, so I've got to quit, so let's stand for prayer.